I think the perception of Arknights as a game over these past years has pretty much just remained the same. It's very solid as a tower defense game, but clearly it's inferior to Bloons in all aspects. As someone who used to play back at launch, dropping the game several months in, I've always been interested in returning, seeing what's changed after these 4 years since those early days of 2020. So of course the sane thing for me to do is to start a new account and play through that for several hours, just so that I can answer one question. How is the new player experience in Arknights? Right, let's get started. And with all great games, we need to start with some light reading. I won't bore you with my half hour of scrolling because the only interesting bit was that little bit where I had to sign away the rights to my organs. We'll enter a name and then we're in, waking up as everybody's beloved amnesiac doctor, along with a brief intro scene. Obviously I can't speak of the story too much, having not read a lot of it, but from what I've heard, it has some really great lore and world building in it, and the sheer amount of story that there is will keep you reading for quite some time. However, an issue that always gets brought up is how it tends to not be told very well, being very long-winded at times. Though if that's not a problem for you, great! Enjoy your completely free of charge 100-hour visual novel. Some exceedingly great value if you ask me. Moving past that, we arrive at the gameplay, but first, about these tutorial boxes. You see here, if you tap once, you get to see the whole text output, as you should. Doing the same thing, however, skips the text this time. This bug has been here for, 4 years now. From what I can tell, this only happens if there's some indicator on the screen at the time, so I guess that's something to be wary of. Actually talking about the gameplay now, the basics are very simple. Bad. Good. Place down your unit and no more bad. Easy. Some other things are here on the UI, but you can probably figure those out as the intelligent person you are. So now we move on to learning some more mechanics one by one, activating skills, using arts to deal with high defense units, and using defenders to block high damage enemies. Fantastic. After a brief scene, we're greeted by the most important screen of the game. And all of these cool buttons that we don't get to press yet. Instead, we're now taken to roll the gacha, our first taste of hell. Here we get Whisper Rain, a 5-star single target healer. I'm pretty sure what you get here is guaranteed to be a 5-star, so that ruins the magic a little bit. We'll touch on the gacha system later, so let's head back and actually play the game. Well, the tutorial guides us back regardless, we don't actually have a choice in the matter here. Before our first taste of actual unguided gameplay, let's take a look at what we're working with. Alongside Whisper Rain from earlier, we have Amiya, a 5-star caster, Yato, a 2-star vanguard, Noir Corn, a 2-star defender, and Rangers, a 2-star sniper. The classes that are given to each operator broadly define the role that they play. Snipers are ranged attackers, casters deal arts damage, defenders defend, healers heal, and vanguards generate deployment points. Apart from Yato, who instead comes back a little bit faster. As for the ones we don't have yet, guards are generally melee damage, supporters do supportive things, and specialists do whatever it is they want. With our all-star team in place, let's just put everything down and win, a show of my true tactical brilliance. We're sent back down to collect some missions after this, and then back into the next stage, the first of many training missions that we will be seeing. These missions cost 0 sanity, our aptly named stamina system of the game, and they generally serve to teach you some new strategy or mechanic. In this one we learn about healing, and we get a new unit to go alongside it, Hibiscus, a 3-star healer. I'd like to head on to the next stage here, but the game decides that its updating takes precedent over my gameplay. So instead, let me just show you the vast collection of incentives for you to stick around before we head towards the next fight. Behold, my perfect strategy once again. You'll see a pattern starting to emerge now, the game's strange need to send us to random menial things after stages. Anyways, here's recruitment, the other side of the soul-draining job application process, where we pick out new blood to fight for us. Mostly just a place to get free 3-star units, but with the right tags you can find some better applicants. To move on a little quicker, let me just summarize some of the next few stages. We start with a training stage teaching us about attack ranges, for the incompetent ones among you that didn't figure that out within the previous few stages. We have an easy stage that drops a drone on us, a training stage that teaches us about said drone after having to deal with one already, another easy stage, and after this, we finally learn how we can upgrade our characters. We have here the classic leveling process, promoting to get stronger and learning skills for higher rarities, character dupe system, skill leveling, and a bar that shows that your favorite PNG truly trusts and respects you as a person. Right, back to stages. Here is a training stage about vanguards and a new 3-star vanguard who generates points by killing enemies. This is a stage where I get baited by an empty path, and we get another 3-star vanguard. This time they generate points from their skill. This is the same stage as the last one, but actually using that lower path. Here is a training stage making sure that you didn't forget to use casters against high defense enemies, along with a new unit and the ability to borrow your friends' characters to trivialize the game. The next stage is more of the same, but we get to level up. After this, a training stage about AoE casters, with a new 2-star AoE caster to go with it. The next two stages are basically the same map, but the former gives us a 3-star AoE caster. We have a training stage telling us to use skills in case you also forgot that from the beginning as well, and also giving us a new 3-star defender. And finally, one last stage that goes very smoothly. After this, they have us learn about the resource stages, the fun ones that give you the important stuff. Clear them each once and then you let the glorious auto-deploy function farm for you. But you still have to wait for it to clear itself, and then you have to manually reselect the stage when it's done though, so it's not completely hands-off. They're completely capable and willing to make skip tickets to bypass this for other content, but I guess they just want to keep that small amount of inconvenience here for you, for whatever reason. Anyways, this stage LS3 is too hard for me. First fail with many to come, finally getting a glimpse of that difficulty creeping in. Back to the story with one more stage, we've cleared the first chapter. But sadly this doesn't mean we're done with the hail of tutorials from the game, because say hello to closure, and to the worst part of the game. This is the base, where we make mostly passive income. We have free money and EXP rolling in at the small cost of cycling our operators in and out every so often to do the work. I can't complain too much since this is free stuff, but still, why do I have to do this? Please just give me the stuff, I didn't sign up to play some scuffed management sim. From here, the game starts to pick up, and the actual reason to play Arknights starts to shine through. For the next few stages, we're introduced to a more varied set of maps, introduced to split lanes having to divide your forces, wider areas where your defensive line is much thinner and harder to maintain, easing you into different scenarios to deal with, and then finally introducing us to the annihilation maps, longer survival stages of 400 enemies. Luckily we're not forced into running these right now, but it is something that you'll be doing weekly for that sweet gacha currency. This used to be a bit annoying to deal with, having to sit on auto-deploy for a significant amount of time every week, but luckily this is one of those skip tickets I mentioned earlier are used, which you get from completing your dailies. After this, even more mechanics are here for us to use, blocking off areas with deployable terrain and interactable objects within levels. And then we see our first boss enemy, Crown Slayer, who can just do this, because fuck me I guess. There's also the introduction of ranged enemies and how they target the most recently placed unit in their range, and this makes ordering of deployment also a factor in your strategy, alongside a cool robot healer thrown in as a new unit. Even as early as chapter 1 you can already start to see how Arknights is as a game. It always has some unique thing to work around to keep things fresh. Finishing up chapter 1 we have 2 more stages, a training stage which serves to introduce us to the boss W, and her mechanic of detonating bombs on our operators, up to 3 at a time when she gets low. Given that most of our units don't survive her devastating attacks, a half-assed defense like here leads to a not so great outcome. I mean, we still technically complete the chapter, but as the self-respecting man that I am, I refuse to be bested by a silly gacha game stage. Going into chapter 2, failing and resetting starts to become a little bit more common. Stages like this are still manageable given that I happen to prepare for them properly, but then there's also stages like this directly after where I accidentally place down both of my snipers, and then I don't have anything to deal with the other set of drones. Or I just run out of deployment points and I let enemies start running by. The game tends towards being more of a puzzle, finding the right operators and where to deploy them given the constraints. Though I don't know if this still applies to endgame content, given that I've heard there are several operators at this point that just trivialize stages. Either ways, by now you've probably seen enough of the game to decide if this is something you'd enjoy. So I guess what's left for me is to look at a few final things and complete the rest of this chapter. Let's start at the first map that I struggled on, 2-5. I failed here several times, having to deal with these new AoE caster enemies dotted around, and a constant onslaught of enemies from both sides. The solution here was to use an AoE caster after my sniper picked off this enemy at the top. Along with a defender, this held off well enough to deal with most of the problems. Since things were starting to get a little bit harder, I thought it might be time to utilize the most effective method of getting stronger: pulling the gacha. Presented here are the three main banners: the starter banner, the normal rate up banners, and the kernel banners. These all have the same 2, 8, 50 and 40% rates for each of the 6 to 3 star rarities. The starter banner has a limited pool. The only 6 stars available are the ones shown here, and you're guaranteed at least one 6 star from your discounted pulls here. For the other banners, the main difference is again the pool of operators being different. The kernel banners have the older operators, whilst the other one has everything else. This of course means you won't be able to get any of the older operators if you want to try for newer characters, which isn't great if you're a new player or you're just missing a lot of the stronger older operators. At the very least, we do have the saving grace of being able to buy them from the shop though, so there's that. From these pulls, we've amassed a decent roster of characters. Though I've decided for the remaining few stages, why not keep to this primarily low rarity run we've got going on. Less for the challenge of it and more because I don't want to spend time running resource stages, and these low rarity characters are cheaper to level up. The next stage took some retries, but it was pretty simple after making sure that all of these crossbow enemies targeted my defenders over the other units. Now remember that character we got from clearing the final stage of chapter 1? Of course not, I didn't bother showing that after all. So here's Shaw, with one of the best mechanics in the game. This trivializes holding certain lanes, being able to deal with enemies very quickly. But this next stage still manages to take some time completing, with these defense buffing drones coming in and making things a nightmare. By the way, I didn't realize that was even happening until I looked at the footage later. And that really explains why I had so much trouble holding off these hordes of enemies here. For a nice change of pace, the next 2 stages are relatively easy, just demonstrating that these new tiles can help operators push with more force, and then they're followed by this slightly more difficult stage. As per usual, the first run never goes well. On the second, they still get through. And again. And again. This was probably the map that took me the longest, a good 40 minutes of retries having to keep Shaw alive to push things off, defending these drop-in enemies right next to our magical blue box, keeping these massive men in check whilst dealing with random drones flying around. Eventually, I figured out the very intuitive solution of ignoring these absolute liabilities and having Shaw deal with these things up here. This allowed me to group the rest of my operators over on the left side and deal with everything pretty easily. We now take on 4 more stages, a platform circled by drones, sieged by jetpack soldiers, a map that looks like they forgot to add the textures to the tiles. Twice, even. And then another standard defense stage with just a little bit of everything, all leading up to the final stage of chapter 2. Whilst this plays in the background, I think I'll start to wrap things up. Arknights truly is a great game, and very much deserves the praise that it gets. The only real issues I have with it are mostly the lacking quality of life features, daily base management, time-consuming auto-deploy and recruitments not letting me skip this paragraph of text. It's really quite pointless, probably just here to make us spend a little bit more time in the game than necessary. As with all gacha games, stepping in this many years past release does have you quote-unquote behind all of the other players, and catching up is no small task given the amount of content to work through and the slower progression as you near the mid-game. But I don't think this is really too much of a problem. Being a single-player game for the most part, there's no reason to race forward to some arbitrary point where you're caught up. The game has a lot to offer, and for anyone coming in at this point, it's probably better just to slow down and enjoy the experience. So yeah, it's a solid game. For any of you reaching this point in the video, feel free to leave suggestions, or maybe some hate-filled slurs in the comments. Either or. I hope you have a nice day.